Eleanor gripped the strap of her designer handbag, her knuckles whitening as the subway car lurched forward, packed wall to wall with a crowd indifferent to the unfolding drama. Her expensive heels pressed into the worn floor, her tailored blazer now feeling like armor too tight for the vulnerable new mother she was. Cradled tightly against her chest, her infant daughter, Chloe, screamed with a piercing, relentless wail that seemed to reverberate off the steel walls and make every passenger in the cramped space flinch or glance away with irritation. Eleanor's heart pounded, not from the rush of the morning commute or the suffocating heat of the packed car, but from a deep and growing sense of helplessness. Despite the polished veneer of success and control she wore like a second skin, the experience of motherhood, raw, unpredictable, and humbling, had shattered her sense of certainty. She whispered soft reassurances to Chloe, her voice trembling, coaxing and pleading with a helplessness that stung more than the baby's cries. But the more she tried to soothe her daughter, the more Chloe's distress intensified until Eleanor felt she was the center of an invisible, judgmental spotlight. All around her, passengers shifted uncomfortably, a collective sigh or sharp glance here and there as if she were a spectacle disrupting their orderly, silent morning. Eleanor's cheeks flushed with a mix of embarrassment and frustration. This was supposed to be a different world. A world where money could buy solutions, where stress could be managed with the right resources. Yet here in this gritty subway car, none of that mattered. The rules were different. Vulnerability was raw and exposed, and Eleanor felt naked before a crowd that had no patience for a crying baby, and a mother who couldn't silence her. Across the aisle, a man watched with quiet empathy. Marcus, a single father and aspiring musician, sat holding his daughter Maya's small hand. His life was a far cry from Eleanor's, a life marked by late-night shifts, modest apartments, and the unyielding grind of trying to provide stability for his little girl after the loss of his wife. Yet he knew this moment intimately. Parenthood was a shared journey of exhaustion, anxiety, and hope, regardless of the social divide. He glanced at Eleanor, noticing the tightness around her eyes, the trembling of her lips as she fought back tears behind the veil of her composed exterior. Maya, sitting quietly beside him, looked toward the distressed mother and her wailing child. With the innocent wisdom only a child could have, she gently nudged Marcus as if urging him to help. Marcus hesitated for only a moment, aware of the stares and the precarious nature of human connection in such a public place. Then, drawing on a deep reservoir of compassion shaped by his own struggles, he slowly rose, his movement calm and deliberate amidst the jostling crowd. As the train rattled over the tracks, Marcus began to hum softly, a lullaby woven from years of comforting Maya during restless nights and lonely hours. The melody was simple, unadorned, yet rich with the tenderness of a father's love. His voice, steady and gentle, cut through the harsh sounds of the subway, the screeching brakes, the murmurs, the impatient shuffles, and filled the small space with a fragile calm. One by one, the passengers noticed the change. The sharp looks softened, the whispers quieted. Even Eleanor felt it, the lullaby wrapping around her like a balm, a momentary reprieve from the chaos. Chloe's cries began to ebb, her tiny body stilling against her mother's chest, her wide eyes rimmed with tears locked onto Marcus's kind face, drawn by the soothing sound that transcended the barriers of class, language, and circumstance. Slowly, miraculously, Chloe's sobs ceased altogether, replaced by tentative curiosity and a fragile peace. Eleanor's breath caught in her throat as she looked at the stranger who had given her the greatest gift she could imagine in that moment: relief. Tears welled in her eyes, not just for the calm that had descended, but for the profound kindness that had bridged the chasm between their vastly different worlds. In that crowded, noisy subway car where judgment had seemed inevitable, Marcus's gentle lullaby had created a space for empathy and understanding. Eleanor felt a wave of gratitude, humility, and connection sweep over her, dissolving the isolation she had carried since Chloe's cries began. As the train continued its journey, a quiet camaraderie blossomed among the passengers, a shared recognition of the universal struggles hidden beneath the surface of everyday life. Eleanor's mind raced, reflecting on the assumptions she had made about people like Marcus, the hard-working, often overlooked faces of the city's undercurrent. She realized that true wealth was not measured by the designer label she wore or the boardroom victories she'd claimed, but by the capacity to offer compassion without expectation, to meet others with kindness in moments of vulnerability. Marcus returned to his seat beside Maya, who smiled up at him with innocent pride, unaware of the small miracle she had inspired. Eleanor carefully adjusted Chloe in her arms, feeling lighter and more hopeful than she had in weeks. When the subway reached her stop, she rose with a new sense of resolve, her eyes briefly meeting Marcus's in a silent thank you that needed no words. As she stepped off into the bustling city, Eleanor carried with her a renewed understanding that in a world quick to judge, the simplest gestures of kindness could transcend any divide and heal the invisible wounds that connect us all. The memory of that lullaby, soft and unwavering, would remain with her, a reminder that amidst the noise and judgment, there is always room for grace, connection, and hope. Victoria's hands trembled as she clutched baby James close to her chest, the shrill, relentless cries of her infant slicing through the cramped, overheated subway car like a piercing alarm. The designer coat she wore, immaculate and carefully chosen to project an image of effortless grace, suddenly felt like a fragile armor against the harsh reality of motherhood she was living right now, exhausted, overwhelmed, and utterly vulnerable. The stifling air of the subway, thick with the scent of sweat and stale coffee, seemed to close in on her, magnifying every sharp glance cast in her direction from fellow passengers. They whispered and stared, judgment dripping from their eyes like invisible daggers. Victoria, accustomed to a life of polished appearances and unspoken expectations, felt utterly exposed and alone in the middle of this judgmental crowd. She tried soothing James with gentle rocking, whispered lullabies she barely remembered learning, and soft coos, but his cries only grew louder, a desperate symphony of discomfort and fear that mirrored the tempest swirling inside her own heart. She felt the weight of failure settle heavily on her chest. Despite her wealth and privilege, here she was, powerless against a newborn's distress and the cruel gaze of strangers. Across from her sat Daniel, a man whose life had been etched with hardship, yet softened by the tender love for his daughter Lily. His worn jacket and tired eyes spoke of endless shifts, tight budgets, and the quiet resilience of a widower who juggled 2 jobs just to keep a roof over their heads. Beside him, Lily clutched her most cherished companion, a teddy bear named Mr. Snuggles, its once plush fur now matted and worn, its seams fraying but still full of the comfort and security it had provided over countless nights of whispered secrets and tearful confessions. The subway's harsh noises and close quarters were a world apart from the peaceful sanctuaries Lily's bear had offered her, but she still held it close, sensing the growing distress around her. Observing Victoria's struggle, Lily's empathetic gaze shifted to her father, and without a word, she extended Mr. Snuggles towards him, a silent plea to help the mother and her baby who seemed so lost amidst the coldness of the crowded train. Daniel understood immediately. With a gentle smile that carried the quiet warmth of a man who had learned to find joy in small acts of kindness, he took the bear from Lily and rose slowly, careful not to draw more attention than necessary. Approaching Victoria, he felt the invisible walls of social division between them, her polished, privileged world and his humble, hard-working one. But he pushed those boundaries aside, guided by the simple, universal language of compassion. Victoria looked up, eyes red-rimmed and glistening with tears, uncertainty flickering in her gaze as the stranger drew near. Without a word, Daniel held Mr. Snuggles out to baby James, the bear's soft, familiar texture bridging the divide between discomfort and solace. Instinctively, James's tiny fingers curled around the bear's worn paw, clutching it as if grasping at a lifeline in a sea of overwhelming sensations. The relentless crying that had filled the subway car softened, transformed first into tentative coos and then to quiet, contented gurgles. Victoria's stiff shoulders relaxed, the tension in her jaw easing as she felt the unbearable weight of the moment lift. She was no longer isolated, but connected by the simple kindness of a father who knew the desperate ache of love and exhaustion all too well. In that brief moment, amidst the rattle of the train and the murmurs of passengers resuming their routines, Victoria saw beyond the polished facades and worn clothes, past the economic divides and social expectations, and into the heart of what truly mattered, shared humanity. She realized that wealth was not measured in designer bags or luxurious homes, but in the depth of empathy one could extend to another human being in their darkest hour. Daniel, with his weathered hands and gentle spirit, had given her a priceless gift, a tube moment of peace, a renewed sense of hope and a reminder that kindness transcended all boundaries. Lily, watching with wide, knowing eyes, smiled quietly, proud that her beloved Mr. Snuggles had brought comfort not just to her, but to a stranger's child as well. As the subway continued its journey beneath the city streets, a quiet warmth spread through the car, an unspoken connection formed through the shared struggles of parenthood, and the recognition that, regardless of background or circumstance, every parent's love was fierce and every child's need for comfort was universal. Victoria clutched Mr. Snuggles close, the bear now a symbol of unexpected friendship and the simple, profound power of compassion to heal and unite, even in the most unlikely places. Sophia sat on the subway bench, her body tense, her mind racing, and her heart heavy with a pressure she could no longer control. As a high-achieving executive, she had always maintained a meticulously polished image, balancing the demands of a relentless career with the equally daunting expectations of motherhood, striving to be the perfect mother, always prepared, always in control. But now, faced with the piercing cries of her baby Noah, she felt every carefully constructed facade beginning to crumble. The subway car was filled with the usual noise, clanking rails, murmured conversations, the occasional cough, and yet none of it compared to the unbearable sound of Noah's wails, which grew sharper and more desperate with each passing moment, echoing inside Sophia's chest like a painful reminder of her perceived failure. She rummaged through her expensive diaper bag, a symbol of her effort to meet every need of her child through purchased perfection. Organic snacks, sensory toys, the latest tech gadgets designed to soothe and distract, but none of it worked. Noah was overstimulated by the cacophony of the crowded subway, the flickering lights, the rattling train, the shifting mass of bodies, and he screamed as if his little world was unraveling. Sophia's fingers trembled as she tried each item in turn, her professional poise slipping away with every unsuccessful attempt, the cries amplifying her growing sense of isolation and inadequacy. Across from her, a man watched quietly, his own young son Sammy, a bundle of restless energy, squirming and babbling beside him. Ben was a single father recently laid off from his job, his days now filled with uncertainty and the constant challenge of making ends meet. Yet his eyes held a calm born of experience, a tenderness forged in countless similar battles with his son's moods and needs. Sammy, curious and lively, glanced toward Noah's distressed cries, his youthful attention drawn to the sharpness of the sound. Observing Sophia's struggle and feeling the weight of her visible distress, Ben reached into his pocket, instinctively searching for a way to help, recalling the many moments when a simple distraction had transformed Sammy's tears into smiles. From the depths of his worn jacket, he pulled out a small set of old, colorful plastic keys, no longer shiny or new but well-loved and familiar, a humble tool in the arsenal of any parent who understands the power of simple comforts. With a gentle shake, Ben sent the soft, cheerful jingle ringing through the air, a sound unassuming yet instantly captivating. Noah's cries faltered, his wide eyes turning toward the gentle noise, his small hands reaching out with a sudden curiosity that transformed his wails into wonder. The atmosphere in the subway car shifted almost imperceptibly. The cacophony of discomfort gave way to a fragile peace, and Sophia, watching in astonishment, felt a spark of hope flicker within her. She realized that despite all her resources and preparations, it was this modest, time-worn set of keys, born not of privilege but of parenthood's intimate understanding, that had brought calm to her child. Ben smiled softly, a gesture of quiet solidarity, knowing that his own struggles had given him a wisdom that money could not buy. He offered the keys to Sophia, who took them with a gratitude that words could never fully express. Their hands brushing briefly, a connection forged not by circumstance but by shared humanity. In that moment, two lives intersected, one steeped in corporate achievement yet vulnerable to the unpredictability of parenthood, the other marked by economic hardship yet rich with the resourcefulness and resilience born of love and experience. The train continued its journey, but inside the small circle of these strangers turned allies, time seemed to pause, a quiet testament to the unexpected ways kindness and understanding can bridge vast divides. Sophia cradled Noah more gently now. Her earlier panic softened into a profound awareness that being a perfect mother was not about flawless control or material possessions, but about openness to help and the humility to accept that sometimes the simplest solutions come from those who have walked harder paths. Noah's breathing steadied, his eyes still wide but calm. And as the soft jingle faded into the background hum of the subway, Sophia and Ben exchanged a final, knowing glance, a silent acknowledgement of the strength found in vulnerability and the beauty of human connection. When the train reached its next stop, Ben gathered Sammy's hand and stepped toward the doors, leaving behind a small but meaningful gift, a reminder that hope and comfort often come in the least expected forms, and that no matter how different their worlds, empathy and kindness could unite them. Sophia remained seated, her heart lighter, her resolve renewed, carrying with her not just the jingling keys but a new understanding that motherhood, and life itself, thrives not on perfection, but on the shared, imperfect moments of grace that sustain us all. Jessica sat rigidly on the crowded subway bench, her poised, impeccable appearance, a crisply tailored white blouse, a sleek designer coat, and perfectly styled hair, standing in sharp contrast to the chaos unfolding in her arms. Her 6-month-old daughter Emily wailed with desperate, heart-wrenching intensity, her tiny fists clenched and her face flushed bright red as she cried uncontrollably. Each shrill cry echoed painfully through the train car, reverberating against the stifling silence that pressed heavily on Jessica's spirit. Around her, the unspoken judgments of fellow passengers manifested in furtive, disapproving glances and subtle sighs. The atmosphere thickened with palpable tension, and Jessica felt the weight of their scrutiny settle on her chest like a crushing burden. Despite her privileged background and the carefully cultivated image of control and perfection, she was overwhelmed and vulnerable, exposed by her baby's cries and the seeming lack of respite. Desperation mounting, she frantically rummaged through her expensive leather diaper bag, a meticulously organized collection of parenting essentials, pristine organic wipes, designer pacifiers, a silk muslin blanket embroidered with delicate patterns. She grasped for anything that might soothe Emily. But nothing worked. The baby's cries only intensified, growing louder and more urgent, a relentless wail that pierced Jessica's heart and frayed her nerves. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she swallowed them, unwilling to add to the spectacle. Across the aisle, Tom, a single father whose weathered hands and worn clothes spoke of a life shaped by hard work and sacrifice, watched quietly with a compassionate gaze. His daughter, Chloe, sat beside him, a quietly observant child whose calm demeanor and gentle eyes contrasted with the tension surrounding Jessica and Emily. Chloe's sharp intuition caught sight of Emily's distress, and without hesitation, she nudged her father and pointed toward her small backpack. Inside was a modest stash of fruit snacks, simple, colorful, soft treats that melted easily in the mouth, a rare luxury for their modest household budget. Understanding the unspoken need, Tom reached into the bag and pulled out one of the soft, dissolvable fruit snacks. He leaned forward gently, offering it to Jessica with quiet kindness in his voice, saying, "Sometimes they just need a little something to chew on." Jessica hesitated, caught between pride and relief. The gesture was unexpected, coming from a man whose life circumstances were worlds apart from her own. Yet in his eyes, she saw only empathy and understanding. Slowly, she accepted the offering, her fingers trembling as she unfolded the packet and broke off a small piece. She brought it to Emily's lips, watching anxiously as the baby paused her cries to explore the new taste and texture. The effect was almost immediate. The relentless wails gave way to curious nibbling, then to soft, contented gurgles as Emily tasted the sweet, gentle fruit snack. Jessica felt the tension draining from her body, replaced by a wave of profound relief and gratitude. She looked up at Tom, a man she might have overlooked in any other context, and recognized something deeper, the unspoken bond forged by shared experience, the mutual understanding of the exhausting, relentless love that defines parenthood. The boundaries of class and social standing dissolved in that small moment of connection, replaced by a profound humanity and genuine kindness. The subway hummed steadily along its tracks, carrying the passengers through the city's underground labyrinth. But for Jessica, time seemed to slow as she cradled her now calm daughter, her heart lighter and her spirit renewed. As the train approached her stop, she rose carefully, mindful not to disturb Emily's newfound peace, and offered Tom a sincere smile of thanks, a silent acknowledgement of the unexpected grace he had extended. Tom nodded in return, his quiet smile warm and humble, while Chloe waved shyly. Jessica waved back, stepping off the train with a newfound hope and the comforting realization that true Support often arises not from wealth or status, but from simple acts of compassion and the shared struggles of life's most vulnerable moments. In that brief encounter, Jessica found a lasting lesson: that kindness transcends social divides, and sometimes the smallest gestures, like sharing a humble fruit snack, can bridge gaps, heal wounds, and remind us all of the common humanity that unites parents everywhere. Michelle sat stiffly on the subway bench, clutching her twin infants, Baby A and Baby B, who screamed in unison with a piercing, unbearable intensity that seemed to fill the entire train car. The chaos of their cries cut through the noise of the city below, a sharp, urgent sound that echoed off the cold metal and glass, demanding attention and patience in equal measure. Around her, the other passengers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, some shooting her tired, judgmental glances, others offering sympathetic but strained smiles that did little to ease the weight pressing down on her chest. She was wealthy, a millionaire by inheritance, a woman who had always lived a life of privilege, but in this moment, none of that mattered. The reality of new motherhood, especially with twins, was exhausting beyond words, an unrelenting tide of sleepless nights, endless feedings, and overwhelming expectations that felt like they were closing in on her from every side. The subway was packed, the noise, the pressure, the eyes, it was all too much. She felt herself sinking, overwhelmed by the impossibility of soothing her babies, their cries growing louder, more desperate, as if reflecting the turmoil inside her. Michelle's hands trembled. She rocked them gently, whispering soft reassurances she wasn't sure she even believed, wishing desperately for relief, for calm, for a moment of peace amid the storm. Across from her sat Chris, a single father with a gentle demeanor and an empathetic heart, someone who understood the chaos of parenting in a way Michelle had never experienced. Chris was a part-time children's entertainer, a man who found joy in bringing laughter and wonder to the lives of children despite his own struggles. His daughter Sophie, a bright and imaginative little girl, played quietly beside him with a hand puppet, a worn, colorful monster with faded fur and bright button eyes, a toy that had seen countless adventures and was now Sophie's cherished companion. Sophie watched the twin baby's distress with wide, concerned eyes. She nudged her father gently, silently suggesting a way to help. Chris nodded, a warm smile spreading across his face as he slipped the puppet onto his hand. With a gentle, playful voice, he made the monster come alive, making silly faces and soft cooing sounds that seemed to weave a spell of magic in the cold, crowded subway car. The vibrant colors of the puppet, the electric blues, fiery reds, and sunny yellows, caught the baby's attention immediately, a beacon of joy amid the gray metal surroundings. The cries that had seemed so endless and unbearable began to soften, transforming from desperate wails into curious gurgles. Baby A's sobs slowed, their little fists unclenching as their eyes locked on the puppet's friendly, dancing features. Baby B too stopped crying, mesmerized by the playful antics and Chris's warm, engaging voice. The atmosphere in the car shifted almost imperceptibly but powerfully. The harsh glares softened into smiles. The tight shoulders relaxed. A sense of calm spread like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Michelle, who had been on the verge of tears, lifted her gaze and met Chris's eyes. In that shared look was a quiet understanding, a profound relief that felt like a lifeline. In a moment of simple kindness and playful imagination, Chris had offered her the greatest gift, a reprieve from the relentless storm, a reminder that sometimes the simplest gestures, rooted in joy, warmth, and connection, could quiet even the loudest chaos. For Michelle, who had felt so isolated and overwhelmed, this moment was transformative. It reminded her that while money and status could not shield her from the trials of motherhood, human kindness and creativity held a power all their own. As the train rolled into her stop, Michelle stood carefully, cradling her now calm babies close, feeling a flicker of renewed strength within her weary heart. The city outside was still noisy and demanding, but inside her, a quiet light had been kindled by the magic of a hand puppet and the kindness of a stranger who understood that sometimes the best solutions come not from control or wealth, but from simple, heartfelt play. Eleanor, a high-powered businesswoman clad in immaculate designer attire, sat rigidly on the crowded subway bench, her polished image betraying the turmoil swirling beneath the surface. The cacophony of the subway, the screech of wheels on tracks, the murmur of conversations, the hum of impatience, paled in comparison to the shrill, piercing cries of her infant daughter, Chloe, who wriggled desperately in her arms, overwhelmed by the unfamiliar noise and the stifling closeness of the packed carriage. Despite Eleanor's carefully curated life of success, control and prestige, she was utterly helpless in this moment, a mother grappling with the all-consuming challenge of calming a distressed child in an environment that seemed determined to judge and isolate her. Around her, the eyes of strangers flickered with thinly veiled irritation, their whispered comments like tiny daggers, reminding Eleanor that motherhood was no shield from social scrutiny, even for a woman who commanded boardrooms and social circles with ease. The subway, a great equalizer of city life, revealed her vulnerabilities starkly. Here was no safety net of wealth or status, only raw human struggle. As Eleanor's attempts to soothe Chloe with soft whispers and gentle rocking intensified the infant's cries, her own composure frayed, and a creeping tide of embarrassment and loneliness threatened to engulf her. It was a moment that laid bare the fragile, tender edges of new motherhood, unseen, uncelebrated, and often unforgiving. Across the aisle, Marcus sat quietly with his daughter Maya, a small, observant girl clutching his hand with quiet trust. Marcus was a single father whose life was shaped by hardships far removed from the polished world Eleanor inhabited. A struggling musician and hardworking parent, juggling odd jobs and late shifts to support Maya after the loss of his wife. He knew well the exhausting demands and emotional weight of raising a child alone. Despite the weariness etched into his face, Marcus's gaze softened as he watched Eleanor's distress, seeing not a privileged socialite, but a fellow parent caught in the same storm of vulnerability. Maya, perceptive beyond her years, nudged her father gently as if intuitively sensing a chance to offer comfort to the upset child. Marcus hesitated only briefly before rising from his seat, the subtle movement causing a ripple through the crowd. He carried with him a quiet strength born from years of sacrifice and empathy, and as the rattling train rocked on, he began to hum, a soft, simple lullaby, one he had sung countless times to Maya in sleepless nights and trying moments. His voice, low and steady, wove through the tension, a delicate thread of warmth and kindness that cut through the harsh sounds of the subway. There was no grand gesture, no flamboyant performance, only the unassuming power of a father's love conveyed through melody. Slowly, miraculously, the relentless cries of baby Chloe began to soften, the sharp edges of her distress blurring into curious glances and tentative calm. The passengers around them seemed to pause, the atmosphere shifting from one of impatience and judgment to something gentler, more understanding. Eleanor's heart, battered and raw, felt the unexpected balm of this kindness and the fragile connection it forged between strangers. As the lullaby continued, Chloe's small hand reached out instinctively toward the source of comfort, and Eleanor's guarded eyes met Marcus's warm, steady gaze. Tears pricked the corners of her eyes, not only from relief but from the profound realization that this simple act of humanity transcended social boundaries and assumptions. Here was a man with little material wealth but an abundance of compassion, offering a priceless gift, a moment of peace in the midst of chaos. For Eleanor, accustomed to controlling every facet of her life with precision, this encounter was humbling, a reminder that the deepest struggles and joys of parenthood are universal and that true wealth lies not in possessions or status, but in empathy and kindness. The subway ride, once a crucible of anxiety and isolation, transformed into a space of shared humanity, where a high-powered executive and a struggling musician could find common ground in their love for their children and the mutual understanding of the exhausting, beautiful challenge of parenting. As the train pulled into Eleanor's stop, she rose with a renewed sense of grace and connection, her eyes briefly locking with Marcus's in a silent, profound thank you. The city's noise resumed around her, but inside, Eleanor carried a quiet revolution, an awakening to the power of vulnerability and the unexpected bridges kindness can build in a world too often divided by judgment. Marcus settled back beside Maya, her small smile reflecting the simple joy of having helped soothe a fellow traveler's burden, unaware of how deeply his lullaby had rippled through the lives aboard the subway that day. Eleanor stepped onto the platform, the weight of her worries somewhat lightened, her perspective forever changed by the lullaby of the subway and the stranger who sang it. Victoria stood in the cramped subway car, her body rigid despite the warmth pressing in from all sides, the relentless screech of the train on the tracks fading into the background, as her entire world narrowed to the piercing cries of her infant son, James. The designer coat she wore, tailored to perfection and chosen to project an image of poised elegance, suddenly felt like an ill-fitting shield, powerless against the raw and vulnerable reality of motherhood that was unfolding in the middle of the packed carriage. The cold stares from fellow passengers, the quick glances filled with unspoken judgment, made her heart race and her face flush with shame, as if everyone around her could see through the carefully constructed facade of success and control to the overwhelmed new mother beneath. James's cries, sharp, unrelenting, and desperate, seemed only to grow louder in the suffocating environment, bouncing off the metal walls and echoing through the confined space. Victoria's hands trembled as she bounced and swayed, whispering soothing words she barely felt, her own anxiety threatening to overwhelm her. She had dreamed of motherhood as a continuation of her perfect life, filled with support, calm, and control. Yet here she was, alone amid strangers, feeling every inch the outsider, her privilege stripped away by the merciless demands of a crying child and the harsh gaze of a public unwilling to forgive or understand. Just a few seats away sat Daniel, a man whose life was etched with quiet struggle yet tempered with resilient love. His eyes, kind but weary, revealed the toll of juggling two demanding jobs to provide for his daughter Lily, a spirited and empathetic child who sat nestled beside him clutching her most treasured companion, a small, worn-out teddy bear named Mr. Snuggles. The bear's faded fur and frayed seams were testaments to years of comfort and countless nights spent as a steadfast confidant during thunderstorms, lonely moments and tender conversations whispered into the dark. The subway was not a place of ease for Daniel and Lily either. The harsh noises and stifling crowds were a far cry from the small sanctuary of their home, but Daniel's gaze remained steady, his heart softening as he watched Victoria's struggle with her infant. He could see the way her hand shook, the tightness in her jaw, and the vulnerable tears that threatened to spill down her cheeks as James's cries tore through the subway car. He recognized a familiar pain in the scene unfolding before him, the raw exhaustion and helplessness that only parenthood could bring, regardless of one's social status or wealth. Lily, sensing the tension, looked up at her father with wide, understanding eyes, then shifted her gaze to Victoria and her baby. Without a word, she extended Mr. Snuggles toward Daniel in a silent, heartfelt plea to help the mother and child caught in their moment of distress. Daniel's smile was hesitant but genuine as he accepted the bear, knowing the small gesture might bridge the divide between two very different lives. Rising carefully so as not to jostle Lily or draw undue attention, he approached Victoria with a kindness born from hardship and love, rather than privilege or ceremony. Victoria's eyes, rimmed with red and glistening with unshed tears, met his uncertain gaze, a flicker of guarded hope shining through her fatigue and embarrassment. Without hesitation, Daniel extended Mr. Snuggles toward baby James, letting the bear's soft, familiar texture offer a silent promise of comfort and calm. James's tiny fingers instinctively reached out, grasping the bear's worn paw with a fragile grip, and almost immediately, the piercing wails that had seemed unstoppable softened to gentle coos and then to curious gurgles. The tension that had filled Victoria's entire body began to dissolve, replaced by a wave of relief and gratitude that spread warmth through her chest and brought tears to her eyes. For a moment, the crowded subway car fell away, and what remained was the quiet miracle of two parents united by the unspoken understanding of love's struggles and the power of small acts of kindness. As the train rumbled forward beneath the city, Victoria clung to Mr. Snuggles, feeling the bear's comforting presence like a tether, grounding her amidst the chaos. She glanced at Daniel, a man she had never noticed before, whose worn clothes and weary expression masked a heart vast enough to hold empathy for a stranger's pain. The invisible walls of class and circumstance dissolved in that moment, revealing a shared humanity far richer than any material wealth could provide. Daniel, despite his financial hardships and long days, had given her something far more precious than money or status, a priceless gift of peace and connection, reminding her that compassion transcends social divides and that every parent, no matter their background, faces moments of vulnerability and need. Lily watched quietly, her small face lighting with a shy smile, proud that Mr. Snuggles had brought comfort not only to her but to a new friend in need. The bear, though worn and tattered, had once again performed its magic, bridging worlds and soothing a frightened child. Victoria found herself softened by the encounter, her usual guarded demeanor giving way to genuine gratitude and a newfound humility. She realized that true strength lay not in perfection or privilege, but in the willingness to accept help and offer kindness without judgment. The other passengers, who moments before had been silently condemning Victoria's inability to calm her child, now seemed to relax, some even exchanging knowing smiles or quiet nods. The atmosphere in the car shifted, warmed by an unspoken acknowledgement of the shared trials of parenthood and the unexpected connections it could foster. The relentless pace of the city outside the train windows carried on, but inside the subway car, a small, profound moment of human kindness had unfolded, a reminder that beneath the surface, everyone is bound by similar hopes, fears, and the desire to nurture and protect the next generation. Victoria gently rocked James, the tension leaving her shoulders as the baby's breathing evened out in peaceful sleep. The presence of the teddy bear acting as a symbol of calm and trust. She reached out to Daniel, offering a tentative smile and a whispered thank you that spoke volumes. Daniel returned the smile, his own heart lightened by the simple act of helping another parent find a moment of peace amid the storm. Lily squeezed Daniel's hand, her quiet courage shining through as she witnessed the transformative power of compassion firsthand. As the train slowed to their stop, Victoria carefully gathered her things, her mind and heart forever changed by the encounter. She knew the journey of motherhood would continue to challenge her in ways she had not anticipated, but now she carried with her a deeper understanding that vulnerability was not a weakness to be hidden, but a bridge to connection, and that true wealth was measured not by possessions, but by the capacity for kindness and empathy toward others. Daniel and Lily stepped off the train with a quiet confidence, hearts full despite the struggles ahead. The worn-out teddy bear, Mr. Snuggles, still clutched tightly in Lily's hand, remained a symbol of resilience, hope, and the enduring power of love to transcend even the greatest divides. In that crowded subway car, where worlds had collided briefly but meaningfully, Victoria and Daniel found a shared truth, that in the face of life's overwhelming challenges, the simplest gestures, an offered teddy bear, a soft touch, a kind smile could ripple outward, creating connections that heal, comfort, and remind us all of the profound human bond that unites us beyond wealth, status, and circumstance. Sophia sat rigidly on the subway bench, her heart pounding harder than the rumbling train beneath her feet, her mind swirling in a storm of frustration and helplessness as her baby, Noah, cried relentlessly in her arms, his small fists balled and his face flushed from the overstimulation of the crowded, noisy environment. She had always been the kind of woman who prided herself on control over her work, her schedule, her image, and, most desperately now, her role as a mother, but none of the careful planning, the meticulously packed diaper bag filled with every soothing gadget and premium toy, nor the latest organic snacks and eco-friendly wipes could quiet Noah's insistent screams, which only grew louder and more piercing with each passing second, echoing off the metal walls and increasing her sense of isolation and failure in a sea of strangers who glanced at her with a mix of sympathy and impatience. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting harsh shadows across the tired faces in the carriage, and Sophia felt a deep, gnawing ache of shame as she struggled to keep her composure, to mask the growing desperation that threatened to overwhelm her, knowing that every sharp cry Noah emitted seemed to underline her inability to fulfill the impossible standards she had set for herself. To be perfect at work and flawless at home, an image she had carefully curated through years of hard work and sacrifice, but that now felt like a fragile mask slipping away under the weight of reality. Across from her, Ben sat quietly, his rough hands resting gently on the knees of his young son, Sammy, who fidgeted with restless energy, his bright eyes scanning the subway car, the corners of his mouth twitching with the beginnings of a smile as he played a quiet game with his father, a game of counting people and finding colors in the flashing signs, designed to distract him from his own boredom and the uncertainty clouding their lives since Ben had lost his job a few weeks earlier. Ben's clothes were worn and a little faded, his shoes scuffed from long walks and little money for replacements, but his gaze was warm and steady, shaped by countless sleepless nights and the tough lessons of single parenthood, where the days were long and the worries often overwhelming.